Live from Jefferson City, it's the This Week in Missouri Politics Midweek Update with Scott Faughn.
Welcome into This Week in Missouri Politics Midweek Update. I got to jump right into our guest. We have one of the most entertaining people and one of the best dudes in Missouri politics. With us live from the JW Marriott is the one and the only Greg Keller.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Thanks so much for joining me. I want to start off with, I want to talk some national stuff, as you're probably the person I know that knows the national scene better than anybody else. But I want to start off the Show Me Institute, something I know you're very involved with and a big promoter of, a conservative think tank out of St. Louis. They released what they thought would be the blueprint for Missouri. And Mr. Singfield knows how to make money. What is the blueprint for Missouri, and how Missourians can, how the state can actually start to grow again?
Yeah, I'm as you said, Scott, I'm on the board of the Show Me Institute. It's the leading think tank here in Missouri from a right of center, really libertarian perspective, all over policy issues, particularly as they pertain to Jefferson City and Missouri. We don't talk too much about the federal issues. Really, the top issues at Show Me Institute are: we want to get rid of the state income tax. We think that's going to grow our economy, going to make us more competitive with states like Florida, Tennessee, Texas, all these other states that are growing like crazy. They're growing like crazy for a reason. They don't have income taxes at the state level. That brings in employers. That makes it a more attractive place for people to live. So we're very active on that.
I've seen Florida and Texas talk about not having an income tax, and I'm like, well, you have tourism and oil. So two things: Missouri doesn't have enough to get rid of income. Tennessee's an interesting one you've mentioned. Tennessee, I would think there's not that many things available to this Tennessee state government that aren't available to Missouri's. What does Tennessee do to replace that, to actually have roads? I mean, I know there's a functioning state government in Tennessee. How do they raise the money for that state government?
Well, one of the things that we found when you look at all the rankings of all these states, the states that are doing the best economically are the ones that do not have state income taxes. Those are the states that have the best funded budgets, the best funded education, the most jobs coming in. So we found that actually the exact opposite is true. By cutting the state income tax, you actually end up with more money in government, unfortunately, from my perspective. But we've seen that across the board. The less income taxes you have, and that could be property taxes, that could be income taxes, that could be all kinds of taxes. The lower tax policies you have, the better these states are going to do, and Missouri would be no different.
I wonder if you looked at Tennessee, if you would see they have a higher property tax or a higher sales tax to augment the not having the income tax. I wonder what their property tax structure looks like compared to ours.
Well, I think that's something we need to look at. I mean, yeah. We're fans, and I'm a fan of consumption taxes. You know, I think it's a much more fair situation where you're taxing people based on what they spend as opposed to what they earn. So yeah, a lot of these states do have higher sales taxes. If we were to cut the state income tax here in Missouri, we would probably have to find some way to get revenue from other places, and that would be one or two places to look for sure.
I like Kehoe talking about some of his ideas to lower it. I've seen people on the campaign trail, and look, I understand that there's politics afoot at everything. I heard people on the campaign trail this summer talk about cutting taxes. I didn't see any sort of a plan to actually do that. Kehoe, I think, is putting together an actual plan. It will involve, I assume, raising some other taxes to offset the lack of the income tax. But I actually, Kehoe's the kind of guy I think actually could maybe accomplish something like eliminating that income tax.
I think that's right. I think one of the great things about Mike Kehoe is that he's a conservative. He's a good rural, outstate Missouri conservative. At the same time, he's someone who knows how Jefferson City works and actually has the ability to build relationships in that building. Yeah. I think Governor Parson is a very fine man. I don't know that he really worked overtime in trying to get his legislative package of really hard things done, working the halls in Jefferson City. I think Governor Kehoe is going to do that. I think what you're going to see is not us getting rid of state income tax in one fell swoop. That's not what people are talking about. Yeah. What we're talking about is rationing
a real
it down
plan.
Slowly.
Not a campaign rhetoric, not a Facebook post, an actual plan to accomplish it. I've watched this, Greg, for a while. I think every governor kind of starts off thinking, we're going to be on a team here, I'm going to deal with the legislature, and over time they do it less and less. And I've heard that's the same thing with the president, but I can tell you with almost every governor I've seen, they start off wanting to get real involved in the legislature and work those halls, and over time, even with Governor Parson, it's a little less and less every year.
I think that's exactly right. I think that's why it's important to have a short list of things that you really care about,
Yes,
big
strike
ticket
early.
items that you want to get done. I think Kehoe's talked about two or three things. He's obviously talked about the crime situation in St. Louis and Kansas City. I think that's going to be a big priority. He's talked a lot about getting our income tax lower. He's talked a lot about education choice, giving our parents and families more options when it comes to how they spend their education dollars. I think you get into a lot of problems when you have too many priorities. If you have too many priorities, you in effect have no priorities. So it's all about choosing what you really care about.
I think, too, striking early is going to be important for him. I think coming out with early priorities, I do think the legislature is in a transition point. I do think that Mike Kehoe's leadership will really matter. But I think, like with every governor, you have a honeymoon. And even Mike Kehoe's honeymoon does have an end date on it. So I think him coming in strong and hard with. Let me ask you another. You're a St. Louis guy. He has a plan for St. Louis crime. I when I've talked to him, I was like, why do you want to take that on? Can you really solve it? And he thinks he can. He's got a plan. I think it involves state control of the police again. But also, if you are a local control of the police guy, I'm not sure you can say things are better than they were. I don't think they're significantly different, but you have it. Local control hasn't been a godsend to the St. Louis Police Department. What do you think? It just from the just white trash opinion from West Butler County, I'm skeptical you can actually end crime in St. Louis or even cut it. Are you?
I'm skeptical you can get rid of it altogether. I mean, listen, Scott, I'm kind of a pessimist on this. I don't think
Yeah.
Republicans in Jefferson City should be returning the phone calls of Tashara Jones or any other Democrat elected official in the entire city of St. Louis. I think that's one of the places we've gone wrong. And with all due respect, I think that's a place where Governor Parson maybe went a little bit off the rails, was listening to the to elected officials who are part of the problem and don't honestly want to see a solution to the situation. I am done believing that Tashara Jones and the likes of the St. Louis Democrat political leadership actually want to see a solution to this problem. If they did, we would have seen some sort of traction. Now we simply haven't. I don't know what the answer is. I do think it doesn't include it includes not getting too involved with St. Louis City Democrat political leadership because they are the problem.
Well, it is. It's interesting. You talk. I think it's very accurate and fair to point out Democrats have ran St. Louis for 50 years. It's been 50 years of decline. I just think those are just facts that are hard to get around. What would you say about Republicans now? They've had the majority for over 20 years, supermajority for a dozen years, the supermajority plus the governor's mansion for 8 years. We're not seeing a lot of growth in Missouri.
Yeah, and I think this is somewhere where you and I, Scott, would probably disagree. I think the biggest problem we have from a legislative and public policy, from a public policy perspective in Missouri, is the filibuster in the Missouri Senate. I know people care about niceties in Jefferson City and the supposed comity of the Missouri Senate. I don't really care about that stuff. I think we need to cut taxes. I think we need to give parents more opportunities to school their kids. I think the Senate filibuster is a huge problem. That's the leadership. It's not going to happen. That's the leadership I would love to see, is for the Missouri Senate to be like every other state legislative Senate in the entire country and actually get some things done. If that means we got to get rid of the filibuster, let's get rid of it. Not a popular idea in Jefferson City, but I think that's the number one obstacle to growing our state.
Well, every type of government you'd hate. The one thing that is for certain, I actually was in the Missouri Capitol when the Democrats ran it. You could be on the other end of that one day. And the Missouri Senate, while it may have kept a few, extreme views or extreme policies from getting passed, it's also kept a lot of ones you wouldn't like from being done. And I'll be honest with you, the less government passes, I'm kind of, when you say I'm from the government and I'm here to help, I watch my wallet and my wife because I don't trust you at all. I think you're going to make a mess of it. So the Missouri Senate cooling down and passing fewer bills, I tell you, folks are so excited now that Bill and Caleb are gone. The only thing worse than the Missouri Senate passing nothing is them passing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, again, I would go back to what I said earlier, which is that you got to have a small number of the right priorities. I want government to get out of the way, and the Missouri Senate gets in the way of government getting out of the way. I want lower taxes. I want more education choice for families so those decisions aren't being made in Jefferson City. The obstacle to that is the Missouri Senate. It is the filibuster, which is totally unique. No other state does it this way. Every other state has a Senate that works
See, I kind of
normally,
like it
except
that
ours.
we don't do the way other states do.
Yeah,
You're selling
like
me on it now.
I'd like to see us get some things done, and I don't really care about niceties or comedy. listen, Jefferson City's great and everything, but I really there are bigger priorities for our state than just how good of friends senators are in Jefferson City.
Well, I don't think people don't. I don't think people defend the filibuster because of niceties. I think they defend it because times change, and watching Missouri vault back and forth with the political winds, I don't think is the best thing. I think a reasonable approach that you can get through the Missouri Senate is good, and then sometimes yes, you're going to have to PQ a few things. I think that's a terrible way to do things, and you hate to see the Senate get smeared with shit, but sometimes they do it. I think a crime plan though can be done without a filibuster, without a PQ. I think a tax cut can be done without a PQ. I don't think you've had to PQ the last few tax cuts, actually. So I guess I don't see it quite in that same vein. But you're from St. Louis, so of course you're going to want to wreck everything outside 270. Tell me what else in this blueprint, though, seriously.
Education choice. I think there's some really interesting stuff in there with regards to nuclear power. They're now using these small modular nuclear devices. Imagine Callaway, but the size of a generator. We now have the technology where we can deploy this kind of nuclear power at that size in places all over the state. When you talk about Missouri needing to produce more energy, I think the future is going to be in nuclear. These small modular devices. You see states like Florida, Tennessee, and others that are moving legislation through their state legislatures to get rid of some of the regulatory hurdles that would make these possible. Imagine if you had a couple extra small modular nuclear devices. They would be right there at Callaway, would provide all kinds of energy, totally green energy, no carbon footprint whatsoever, would hugely boost the amount of energy we have here in Missouri. I think that's an exciting part of the blueprint as well.
Greg, is there somebody that has is in the blueprint a list of what regulations would need to be changed to do this?
Yeah, well, what we have specifically is some points about here's some legislation that has been considered in other states that would be helpful to this. So yeah, there are all kinds of legislative, regulatory, environmental roadblocks that are in the way, and we're very specific about what we would do to get some of those things out of the way so we can get more power in Missouri.
So where can folks find the blueprint?
Best way to go is just go to our website, showmeinstitute.org. You find all kinds of stuff there about our staff, about our board, about our various policy initiatives. Great kind of one-stop shop for anyone from kind of the right of center libertarian standpoint.
Let's take a second. When Greg does come to Jeff City, there's only one hotel I'd put him up in. It's Courtyard by Marriott. For his 1 to 2 trips a year that we wrestle him over here, if we can get him to stay the night, we put him up in the nicest hotel in Jeff City, the Courtyard. And if you ever get up north of Kansas City, up by Savannah, I want to take you and introduce you to Jim at United Fiber, some of the best rural broadband, the gold standard for how to do rural broadband is up in northwest Missouri at United Fiber. I also got to thank, you talk about a rising star. David Castile gave me this authentic German Stein today. That dude, I'm telling you, that dude is a business guy. He's got a little bit of that Trump about him. Castile is keep an eye on that dude. Let's talk about the national scene.
How many of those Steins you up to now, Scott? How many of those do you own?
We're touching 500.
You're kidding. I thought
you
got
to come to Speakeasy.
I got to come by.
You do it. You got the APAC event's usually in February.
Yeah, we're going to do it actually in January. I believe it's January 4 or January 5. We're going to be hosting it at the governor's mansion.
Awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, hope to see you there. I'll make sure you get the invite.
Would love to. It has really been interesting. I think every cause, you could get a little stale, right? I guess to me personally, if I have to pick a side, it's going to be the side of Israel in that fight. But I'll be honest with you, it kind of was out of the top of my mind until October 7th of last year.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, it just kind of, I guess any cause can get a little stale, and I'm just speaking for me personally. I probably had quit paying a lot of attention to it until something happened, and I think you're seeing the reverberations of that event throughout the Middle East now.
Yeah, and I was one of the first people to go into Israel following the attacks on October 7th. I was there, I think,
I text you, what the hell are you doing? Don't you read the news?
Yeah, just a few months, just a few months after the attack. I think we were the first American group that was let in. We got to see the border. We got to see the kibbutzes that were overrun by Hamas and their fighters. I think, Scott, to your point, yeah, it's easy to lose sight of Israel. I've been there a few times now, though, but that's a country that always faces an existential threat. They are always just one day away from their country potentially being wiped out. Shoot, I don't know. We did our APAC event in Jefferson City last year. We must have had what, 500 pro-Hamas protesters at our event in
And they
Jefferson
just
City,
showed
just
their
getting to
ass.
totally showed their ass. The things they said, the things they did, it was totally despicable. It's really kind of what you would expect from people who support Hamas. But yeah, I'm all in for Israel. I think it's become a little bit more difficult in recent years because of the whole Ukraine thing. I think I'm sitting here in Washington, D.C. today. You see Republicans who generally want to stay out of foreign fights, foreign wars. We've always stood by Israel. We're going to continue to, I believe. But when you see something like Ukraine, where we're pumping a quarter of I think we're up to $200 billion we've sent into Ukraine now. That really makes it harder for those of us on the right who are big time Israel supporters to say we need to stick with this ally when you see all this other money going out the door to a country like Ukraine, who we really don't have nearly as close a relationship with.
It does feel like with Trump there, it was a good election for the state of Israel, I believe. But it does feel like the Democrat Party, that's one of the rare things you saw both parties generally agree on was support for Israel. It appears to me, if you look into the future 5 years, the Democratic Party, it will not be a friend to Israel. Neutral is probably the best Israel can hope for from the Democratic Party going forward.
I think that's right. When you look at kind of the animated base of their party,
Yeah.
It is young voters, and these people really believe that Israel's the problem. These people believe that groups like Hamas and Hezbollah are groups that you can treat with, that you can work with. The beating heart of the future of the Democrat Party is very much of kind of that woke, mindset coming from our campuses. That's going to be a serious problem for us.
So, Greg, tell me, in Washington, I guess the shock is worn off.
Yeah.
From the folks I talked to out there, there is a buzz. There's an excitement about the new president.
Oh, yeah.
There's an excitement that he's not maybe keeping a lot of the old agreements.
Yeah, you look at the appointments that he's making. He just named a couple new ones yesterday, new FTC chair and a couple other positions. I'll tell you, Scott, this is actually the first time I've been in Washington, D.C. since the election, and you can just feel it in the air. The energy, the expectation. Gone, I think, is a lot of kind of that self-loathing kind of atmosphere that takes hold in Washington, D.C. when Democrats are in control. People are just a little bit lighter. They're a little bit happier. People are excited about the future. You didn't get that sense over the last 4 years. It's a totally different feel here in Washington. I was at the Capitol yesterday, saw many members of our congressional delegation who will go unnamed. People are excited. People are really hopeful about the next 4 years, and I think you're already seeing that manifested in some of the decisions the president's making.
Well, let's talk about locally. You came at a special time of the year. Kelton, can you get our graphic ready? You came during the 12 days of DEI at the Department of Insurance.
Yes.
Day of Christmas, my true love sent to me. 9 ladies dancing, 8 maids of milk and 7 swans a swimming, 6 geese a laying, 5 gold rings.
Now, Greg, we have for you today on the 9th day of DEI, and it's really hard to condense it all into 12, I'll be honest with you. But so they go to these conferences. So your tax dollars, and if you're an insurance agent, your fees go to pay for people to go to conferences like this one. Colin, can you put up the first one? And that's John Rehagen. This is the mission that they were talking about at their conference. Their mission is to embed and inspire inclusion, diversity, equity, and acceptance throughout our business. That's what the speaker was telling them to do. Now, Kelton, you might ask, what the hell does that word suit mean? I don't know. But luckily, there was another slide on our 9th day of DEI. Kelton, could you go to the second slide, please? Now, Greg, the second slide explains what that's supposed to look like. And so what they encourage is 11 employee different diversity things, so everybody can be split off into their own diversity. They want full-time DEI team supports, employee engagement, a bunch of silly ways they've come up to say really how racist you are. But here's the employee networks. All abilities employee network. That's not Greg. Black employee, no. Experienced professionals, that's the old folks. No. Hispanic. Actually, of all these 11, Greg, you're not in any of them.
I don't
And
think I
that's
am represented in any of those. I'm not even a young professional anymore.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I don't. Somehow they forgot Greg. Maybe they should just have an employee group for Greg or guys named Greg. I don't know, but it is bizarre. You see Republicans promise they're going to end this kind of silly Marxist bullshit. And I honestly, the truth is, I didn't know about this. It hides in plain sight. These folks are proud. They take their awards and put them on the website. I guess it comes down to this question. You know Mike Kehoe very well. Mike Kehoe said on this program, he said on other things, he will end the woke nonsense. I know he knows about it now. I don't think the director's coming back, but she didn't show up to work anyway. I mean, she really wasn't the director.
Yeah.
You have Rehagen, who is not a Greitens liberal. He's not a Nixon liberal. He's a Holden liberal, who's a great man, but let's be honest, maybe second to Greitens, the most liberal governor of our millennium. And I got to tell you, I wonder, Mike Kehoe gave his word he would fire folks like Rehagen, clean the place out. Do you think he keeps it?
I think he's going to do it. I think Mike Kehoe is a man of his word. I think he also understands the political moment in which we are. I know you're a good friend, and I'm a good friend with Senator Schmidt. We look at someone like Senator Schmidt, who really understands where the Republican and conservative electorate is right now. He really has his finger on the pulse of where our Missouri people are. I think Mike Kehoe's the same way. I think he realizes that that the time for this kind of stuff has passed. I think he's going to take action. He's also a businessman, too.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy who came up from nothing, who just wants to see, more than anything else, wants to see things work well. He has spent his entire life making businesses, other organizations run better. I think that's at the heart of who he's going to be as a governor. I think you're going to see swift action.
You mentioned Eric Schmidt, our guest on This Week in Missouri Politics, the last show of the year. Eric will be our guest. It's interesting. The Eric Schmidt I saw campaign in 2008, the Eric Schmidt I saw even in his first term in the Senate, I actually think the Republican Party nationally has moved to pretty much where Eric Schmidt started. It is a little more focused on working people. It is a little more inclusive. And by inclusive, I don't mean like pity charity stuff. I mean true inclusion of, hey, let's bring you in because your perspective might make this operation better, not let's do some charity thing where you're here just because of some box checking. I think the party has came to Eric Schmidt in many ways.
I think that's exactly right, Scott. And I think, listen, you put up that DEI thing on the screen earlier, and I was looking at that actually from a political lens because you see, the Hispanics, Trump won those people. Yeah. You see blacks, African Americans, Trump won a huge portion of those, particularly young black men. Native Americans, Donald Trump won the Native American vote, Scott. I mean, this is a constituency that usually goes 30-70 against Republicans. I think people like Donald Trump and people like Eric Schmidt, I think they gain so much of their strength from the fact that they just treat people like people. Get rid of this DEI stuff. Quit separating people into their constituent groups and just treat people like people. I think both Schmidt and Trump and Josh Hawley long time ago saw which way the puck is going when it comes to the kind of future politics of America, and now they look like geniuses. And Scott, let me just finish with this. I mean, Eric's a good friend of yours. He's a good friend of mine. I see him often when I'm here in Washington, D.C. I mean, that guy is a force in the nation's capital. Everyone knows who he is. Everyone likes him. Even if they don't agree with him, everyone wants to work with the guy. He is an absolute star. He can be in the Senate for as long as he wants to. But, Scott, there may be better things in store for him in the future. I'm glad he didn't go into the Trump administration.
Me too.
But that is a guy whose upside is unlimited.
I actually believe Eric Schmidt could be president of the United States one day. I think he's taken to this role of United States Senator. I'm not surprised, honestly. But I had very high expectations. And, I think it took him a year to kind of get settled in. But once you saw him get the staff aligned, once you saw him get a feel for for playing in the big leagues, right? That second year, he's just been, like you said, I think the best word is a force. Only Eric Schmidt could be lucky enough to tick off the Senate leader, and then the Senate leader have a stroke 2 months later. I mean, things are just falling in place for Eric. They just are.
I totally agree. And it's a good reminder, too, that this is a people business at the end of the day. And Eric is a very erudite, very smart guy. He's also just one of the most decent people you would ever want to see in the United States Senate. And when people just generally like you, it makes a huge difference in your ability to get things done. And I think his likability and just his personal charisma is a big part of this.
And it's a tightrope right now because I think the public wants you to be angry and spitting nails. But if you're actually going to accomplish things, you're going to have relationships. You don't form many relationships without being nice to people. It is an interesting, but I think Schmidt he knows how to strike that vein just right to be the person they want on the news, Fox News at night, and his colleagues to actually say, well, we'll give that to Missouri. I like Eric.
Yeah, he does it with a smile on his face, and I think a lot of times it's kind of how you deliver it. I love Josh. I've been a paid consultant to Josh Hawley over the years. Josh, let's be honest, has a little bit harder of an edge about him.
Yeah.
Eric, I think, has a lot of the same policy positions as Josh. You don't see them differing on policy all that often. But I think with Eric, what you see is oftentimes he's doing a lot of the same things. He's doing it with a big smile on his face, though, and I think that goes a long way.
Greg Keller, thank you so much. I hope you have the absolute merriest Christmas. I really appreciate you making the time to join us.
You guys are the best. Have a great week.
And maybe see you this weekend?
Yeah, let's do it.
Perfect. Thank you, buddy. Talk to you later.
Okay. See you, brother.
All right, Kelton, the Mizzou line has tightened. Now we are at 3. It went from 3.5 to 3. Are you sticking with your Tigers?
Absolutely.
And so you're having to give 3 points. Do you think Mizzou? Are you going to give the points?
Oh yeah, 3's nothing.
Okay, you're taking the handicap. Mizzou by 3. I'm taking Mizzou by 3 just because I don't think Iowa can score. I think Iowa. It'll be a tough game on the defensive side, but I mean, I just don't think Iowa can score points. We'll call this the Jason Clint Bowl.
I just don't think Big Ten ball is what it used to be, so they're going to get an SEC awakening.
Boy, I tell you, it is interesting. What about Belichick to North Carolina? What do you think of that?
That's a good move for that program, I think.
It's a good move for the program, and that is a sleeping giant of a program. I mean, they have legit boosters. I mean, look what they do with that basketball program. They could be a big football powerhouse if they wanted to be. I find very few of these swan song jobs really work out all that well. I've watched some managers go manage one last place after they were out. I watched Tony La Russa go back to the White Sox for a year. I don't think he would do it again if he had it to do over again. I think it's probably raises North Carolina's profile, but it's seldom do you see these kind of swan song acts really turn out with like a Hollywood ending.
And college ball is a whole different beast than pro ball.
Yes, and it is, especially with NIL now. My God. All right, folks, thank you so much. Sunday, This Week in Missouri Politics, Eric Schmidt. We have an opinion maker panel that includes Jack Cardetti and Casey. Why don't we see if we can get Casey in here next week?
Let's get her on.
Let's do a couple of these next week. There will be a This Week in Missouri Politics, a special one for Central Missouri about Mark Alford and his time traveling the state in August. But next week, maybe we get a guest. Maybe we see if Casey will come in. What do you think?
I say let's get her on.
All right. 12 days of DEI. Stay tuned. There's these people. We'll see you Sunday on This Week in Missouri Politics.